Nice. She found it on Friday. We like that. Welcome. Well, thank you so much for sticking with us during our series on prosperity and abundance. Have you guys liked it? Has it made a difference? Has it been good? Okay. Excellent. I enjoyed it. Our series in November is going to be 30 Days of Gratitude. So we're going to be talking about gratitude. So come back for that. That will be fun. I'm actually going to try to come up with some exercises on gratitude. If anybody has any ideas, call me or shout them out. Because it would be fun to actually do something. I'm thinking of giving everybody a journal and having us have a gratitude journal for 30 days. So let's think of some good ideas. So today, I want to talk about stewardship. Because it seemed to me a good way to wrap up our series on abundance. We've talked about that the universe is a wonderfully abundant place, that our gifts multiply in the giving, that resources come to us when we step out and we do what we love. So we've talked about many aspects of abundance. We know that the spirit of abundance begins with a sense of gratitude. So today, what I'd like to talk about is stewardship. For those of you who couldn't be here last week, you missed a wonderful talk by Jeannie Ward on the gift in giving. I've posted it on YouTube. I hope that you get a chance to look at it. One of the things I'm going to ask you today is whether you've done the homework she gave you. Now, the bad news about me mentioning homework right now is I know for the next 5 minutes everyone's going to be thinking, there was homework? There was homework? And so anything I say in the next 30 seconds is going to be gone. Don't think that. Okay, I'm going to bring it up when it's appropriate, so don't worry about what the homework is. There's not a test. So, yeah, really. So, stewardship is not a word that we hear a great deal or that we use a great deal. To me, when I started researching this talk, it kind of struck me as more of a traditional Christian term, but it's a wonderful term for what I want to talk about, which is caring for the gifts and the resources that we are given. Specifically, I don't want to talk about money. I want to talk about the stewardship of our physical environment, our planet Earth, our home, our talents, and our time. How do we care for those wonderful resources that God has given us? Because whenever we think about stewardship, we always think about tithing or money. But one of the things that we have learned and that Jeannie reminded us of is look around at all that is offered to you. Being aware of all the gifts that are just showered on us. And so the question today is, how do we take care of them? How do we act as effective and loving stewards? I did some research into what various wisdom traditions say about stewardship, about our obligation to care for our physical planet, because I'm going to talk about that first, with love and respect. Now, Christianity and Judaism, as we know, teach that God gave man, what's the D word? Dominion, yes, thank you. Dominion over the earth, as is taught in Genesis 1:26 through 28. God gave humans, quote, dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, and over all wild animals of the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth. Okay, now dominion is a word that has been misapplied sometimes and misunderstood. It's been used to excuse exploitation, sometimes plunder. It's a word that sometimes has been used to place man above his world and to put the world at his service and at his pleasure. But that is not what was meant. Dominion does not mean submission or exploitation. It does not even mean ownership. Psalm 24 teaches us that the earth is the Lord's and everything in it, the world and all who live in it. Don't we know that to be true? We don't think we own anything. We think we are custodians of it. We think we are caretakers of it. And our job is to leave it better than we found it. Isn't that what we believe? I think it is. As the manifestations of the divine here on earth, as the hands and the feet and the voice of God here on earth, we are entrusted with creation, to care for it in accordance with our own Christ natures, with reverence and respect, as caring for the creation of God. That is our function as we care for our physical resources, for any resources. The way we care for our planet is an inevitable extension of our connection to Source, an extension of our love for each other. Do you see what I mean? How we make every choice surrounding how we care for this world of ours is an extension of our love and our caring for God and for each other. We take care of God's world for the time we are here, and then we pass it on, better than we found it. If you study Buddhist tradition, the same notion of loving care applies there. Now, the Buddhist worldview does not contain the notion of stewardship. It doesn't contain the notion of dominion. It doesn't imagine a world in which God or any divine being placed man above the world. Instead, the Buddhist tradition sees man on a par, on the same level with all sentient beings. We are all connected. We are all one. We love and respect and care for each other. Man is not above. But the obligation, according to the concept of right action, which is one of the steps in the Eightfold Path, is to treat the world ethically, to consider the past, present, and future generations. We use what we need, we live simply, we care for our world, we live with moderation. We respect nature because in nature is where peace is found. So even though you're not going to see a concept of stewardship, you're going to see the notion of loving care for the natural environment that surrounds us, for the world, for nature that surrounds us, and for man, animals, plant life, all life. Then we talk about Native American traditions. Many Native Americans live according to the principle of the seventh generation. Are you all familiar with that? I love that principle. The principle of the seventh generation teaches that in every decision, community, individual, or corporate, we must consider how our choices will affect our descendants 7 generations down. It's in the principles of the Iroquois Nation, and it's followed by most, if not all, Native American communities. Every choice we make, we are obligated to consider how it will affect the 7th generation down. Will the beauty around us still be there based on the choices we make today? A generation is 25 years, so that's 175 years. We have a responsibility toward those who follow, human, animal, plant life, and what the principle of the 7th generation teaches us, and the other wisdom traditions that talk about stewardship or loving care, is that our imperative to take care of the resources we have now are more pressing than the bottom line. They're more pressing than the quarterly obligation to show a profit. We need to consider long-term cost when we are making the choices we make today. Imagine, just sit for a second and imagine how life might be different if we all applied the principle of the 7th generation. To say the governmental choices we make. Merriam-Webster defines stewardship as, quote, the careful and responsible management of something entrusted to one's care. Something entrusted to one's care. Think about that. Just think of the energy with that phrase, things entrusted to our care. It just lifts me up. I'm good enough to have stuff entrusted to me. As a child of God, all this has been entrusted to me and to you and to all of us. It means that the resources that I have in my life, I don't own. I can't pile them up. I can't do nothing with them. I can't spend them wastefully. I can't squander them because they're not mine. If I owned them, I could do all those things, but I don't. I have a responsibility that extends beyond me to put them to their best, their highest uses. I am a steward, not the owner, as are all of you, of the bounty that God has given us. We are all caretakers. And it's in that attitude that we have to approach how we live in our world. And it changes how we live in our world. This is not my stuff. You've all heard, well, maybe you haven't, but have you read in the Bible the parable of the talents, the 10 talents? The master gives out 1 talent to 3 different servants. One goes out and multiplies it, and he is rewarded highly. One just hides it. He says, I didn't know what you want me to do with it, so I didn't do anything with it. Here it is. And he is punished because he took that resource and he did nothing with it. It just sat there. That is not what the universe wants us to do with the bounty that it showers on us. We know that to be true because we've been studying it all month. And I'm guessing you knew it before we even started this series on abundance. Because we've talked about this before and you see it in your own lives. We believe that if all is good, that all we have comes from spirit, all we have comes from source. Our bounty, the gifts we have, are not the product of our own merit, our own wisdom, where we went to school, how good looking we are, how much we weigh. If we work and earn it, if we have the opportunity to work and earn the things that support us in life, it's because of the gifts we were given, of intelligence, of industry, of opportunity. What we have is the result of what Spirit showers on us. We are co-creators here, so we have a part to play. We can't just sit and wait for this stuff to fall on our heads. We have to get out there and put one foot in front of the other. But we are not pulling all the levers. We know that. We are supported and sustained by a universe that is just conspiring for our highest good, that wants us to succeed, that pushes us forward at every step, that is working toward our good, even though we may not always see it. Sometimes we have challenging experiences, often we have challenging experiences. We maybe can't see over that next horizon, but we trust that our good is coming. We are in the flow. We don't make the flow, we don't even direct the flow. But our task is to remain in it. So, what does this mean to us? Again, we're still talking about our physical planet here. A lot of things I've said talk about other resources too, but I want to talk about Earth for a minute. What does this mean to us as loving caretakers of the physical wonders that sustain us and surround us and nourish us? As we look around our planet, it means that we play a part in preserving and in protecting it, even if our part is a small one. So, sometimes we get up here, sometimes I get up here, and I talk a lot about principle, and I talk a lot about spiritual values, but when we're talking about caring for our resources, to me, this is where the rubber hits the road. This is where we think about how our actions collectively and individually make a difference. Now, individually, we all do a good job. We conserve, we recycle, we drive Priuses, or, well, I did until we got smacked, but, we drive cars that, do not use up a lot. We worry about our footprint for this planet. But on a global level, on a collective level, our report card really is not so good. And because our mission and vision here is to create a global community centered in peace, love, and joy, we need to consider how we are doing globally caring for our planet. So, what I did in preparation for this talk is I did some research on environmental change. I did some research on climate change because I didn't know a lot about it. And I think when we're talking about stewardship, that matters. Now, does it mean that each of us is going to go out individually and change the world? No. But people don't go out individually and change the world. We each do our part. So I just wanted to share with you what I found about this. I learned a great deal, and I just wanted to pass it on, because we all are stewards of this place that we call home. I learned that global greenhouse gas emissions due to human activities have grown since pre-industrial times, with an increase of 70% between 1970 and 2004. Think about that. How many thousands, hundreds of thousands of years have we been around? Greenhouse gases have grown 70% between 1970 and 2004. There have been many effects, and there will be many effects, including melting glaciers, rising sea levels, increased precipitation and storm activity, wildlife moving north to cooler and higher climates as warmer climates spread. I learned, and I didn't know this, I didn't know a lot of this, that in many ways the temperature and the agricultural conditions which made the United States the breadbasket of the world are moving north to Canada. In years to come, if this continues, our farming conditions are going to be moving north, which I guess is going to make us all want to move to Canada, especially since, as Stephanie pointed out, they do have universal health care. But what does that mean for us? We don't know what these changes are going to mean. But these climate changes have a real impact The International Panel on Climate Change, which is a wonderful website. If you want to go and learn about climate change, you should really go. It's the IPCC, warns that if the warming trends continue, we could see some or all of these effects, which I didn't know about. Well, sea levels are expected to rise between 7 and 23 inches by the end of the century. You know, it's funny. My wife has a friend. She works for a governmental agency, and she has a friend who just returned from a trip to the Marshall Islands. And when her friend came back, she was just devastated because the people in the Marshall Islands are seeing the sea levels rise now. Imagine that. You're sitting at your front door or on the beach, and you are seeing the plot of land in which you live growing smaller and smaller. That is happening now. And these people are terrified as to what it means in future years. Continued melting at the poles could add between 4 and 8 inches. Hurricanes and other storms are likely to become stronger. We're seeing that now. We're seeing the increasing severity of storms globally now. Species that depend on one another may become out of sync. Plants could bloom earlier than their pollinating insects are mature to pollinate them. Well, what does that mean? Greater minds than mine have to address that. But these are all things that might occur if these warming trends continue. Floods and droughts, those extremes will become more common. Rainfall in Ethiopia, where droughts are already common, could decline by 10% over the next 50 years. There's going to be less fresh water, potentially. One of the things you read if you study the news is people used to fight about oil, and they still do, but now the fights are about food and water. And these issues can exacerbate as climate change continues. If the Cuelcaya ice cap in Peru continues to melt at its current rate, it will be gone by 2100, leaving thousands of people who rely on it for drinking water and electricity without that resource. And they're going to have to find something else or move. Diseases may spread, including malaria spread by mosquitoes. Ecosystems will change. Some species will move. Ecosystems will change. Wildlife research scientist Martin Obard has found that since the mid-1980s, polar bears have gotten thinner. Have you all seen, I know you saw those documentaries where polar bears becoming thinner. There are naturalists who are concerned that polar bears, as their climates change, are just going to die off. Extinction threatens hundreds of species if these trends continue. So, you may ask, why am I telling you this? Well, some people consider climate change a political issue, and my job is not to be political about this. I think the science is beginning to agree that this is a fact that is actually occurring because of human activity. I mention it because I want to go back to stewardship. We are called to be caretakers of the gifts that we are given, and we have an opportunity now in this time to do a better job, to be a voice for change on this and other issues. These changes that are being inflicted now and that may be inflicted in the future are massive to humans, to animals, to vegetation, to ecosystem. Our mission and vision call for us to work toward a global community centered in peace, love, and joy. That requires more, sometimes, than just thinking about it. Sometimes it requires actually taking a step to work on it, if you are called to do that, if you have the ability to do that. We don't limit it to easy issues, and we don't limit it to short-term fixes. We don't even limit it, here at One World, to changes that we see ourselves. Remember the adage about the guy who plants a seed knowing that he may never sit under the tree? We don't limit it to changes that we are going to see or benefit from. We make sure all we can do, because we know our job is to take a step and release the outcome. All we can do is keep working toward the vision that we have, the hopes that we have, the world that we see, with every step we take and every choice we make, hoping that 7 generations down, people will still be able to sit under beautiful trees, drink fresh water, enjoy nature that God has given us. In the past, we have reflected on the fact here in this community that we were all lucky enough to be born now and here. Don't you sometimes think there's a reason we're now and here? It's because we have the ability to impact events. We are here for a reason. Think about that. Our souls are here for a reason. And one of them is to take care of the resources with which we are blessed. So we ask ourselves, what can I do? Well, that's a question for each of us. I mean, we're not all going to go out and change the world. We're going to continue to recycle. We may make choices that influence government to care for our planet. Whatever we do, we maybe just do it in our own little circle. But think about it. If millions of people made changes in their own little circle, that's all it takes. That's what creates a change in consciousness, is one heart at a time. Don't we know that to be true? And that is what we do here. That is what we believe in here. That is what we start here. Every step we take, every choice we make. That is our mission and vision. And if I know anything about this community, it's that we live according to it. There's a legend in the Middle East, I just love this story. It's quoted by Ruth Fischel in the book 5 Minutes for World Peace, of a little sparrow lying on its back in the road. This little sparrow is lying on its back in the road with its feet sticking up in the air. And this horseman comes by and he says, "What are you doing? Why are you lying down in the road with your feet sticking up in the air?" And the sparrow says, "I heard that the sky was going to fall today." And the horseman says, "Are you joking? What can you do? You're just a little sparrow. You can't hold up the sky." And the sparrow says, "One does what one can. One does what one can." That's what we do. We do what we can. And we call it good. We can't save the world ourselves, but it doesn't mean that we don't try. Like the sparrow, we lay down in the road and we hold up our little bit of the sky. So, that's my thought on physical reality, on our world, as we are called to be loving stewards of it. Let's change our attention now to the other two topics I wanted to talk about, which are time and talents. Time. Are we good stewards of our time? Okay. I have to raise my hand because I'm an awful steward of my time. I debated over whether I was going to tell you the story, but I will. I was doing some work this week, and I was just tired of doing it, so I find myself watching 15 minutes on YouTube of Harry Potter bloopers. I am not making this up. Am I proud of that good use of my time? Probably not. Probably not. I mean, maybe it just showed I needed some leisure moment at that time. But time is not an unlimited commodity for us here in our human suits. It's an unlimited commodity generally, but for us here, good stewardship of our time calls us to be aware of what we are doing. Thoreau said, "It's not enough to be busy, so are the ants. The question is, what are we busy about?" Stewardship of your time is being aware of what you are being busy about, valuing your time, respecting your time as much as you respect yourself as a child of God. Sometimes the best time is spent sitting, praying, meditating. We all need to do that. But it's being aware of what you are doing. It's being aware that your time is a resource. It's a valuable resource. It's energy. And you need to use it with integrity in fulfillment of the virtues you came here to represent. So being aware of how we use our time is an important thing. Because for us here in our little human suits, it is not unlimited. Let's talk about our talents. And this is where Jeannie's homework comes in. Is there anybody here who remembers what Jeannie's homework was? I'm not going to make you raise your hand. Jeannie's homework was asking you to identify what are the treasures that you offer. Remember she talked about that? She said, I want everybody to identify what are the treasures that you offer. Sometimes that's not hard to do. Sometimes it's a challenge to figure out what are the treasures that we offer, but we are resources. Our gifts are resources. Our connection to God is a resource. The fact that we can sit in the silence and know that we are one with Source is a gift. It's a resource. The talents we are given, whatever they are also resources that we are called upon to be effective stewards of. Because again, they're not ours. We have them for a reason. We have them to improve this world. Again, to leave it a better place than we found it. So, as I was researching this talk, I came across a lady named Katharine Drexel. Who here has heard of Katharine Drexel? She was a 19th century heiress from the Drexel family in Philadelphia. Her uncle actually started Drexel University. She was born to a life of wealth and privilege. Her family also had, unusual then, a tradition of philanthropy. Twice a week, they would open their homes to widows, single women, poor people. I guess back then single women were poor people, God only knows. But anyway, they would hand out food and clothing and resources to whoever showed up. And if people were too proud to come, the family would go to them. Katharine developed an interest in the plight of Native Americans, again, very unusual for class and status back then. She was born in 1858, I believe, and she began a lifelong work of support to missions and missionaries in the U.S. Now, here's where it has to do with resources and talents. In January of 1887, she and her sisters were given an audience with Pope Leo XIII to ask him for missionaries to send to all the various missions that her family money was funding. Up until then, her only support had been financial. She was just giving money. So she goes to Pope Leo and she says, I need you to send some missionaries. Leo looks at her and says, why don't you become one yourself? She was sitting in her home in Philadelphia, surrounded by servants and money, funding a lot of wonderful things, and Leo challenged her. He said, why don't you become a missionary yourself? And she did, scandalizing Philadelphia society. The newspapers read, Miss Drexel joins convent, gives up $7 million. Literally, I know. So she did. She joined, she began a lifetime service to Native Americans and later African Americans in the western and southwestern U.S. She opened schools, she opened missions. With her money, she addressed a need wherever she saw it. She established the Sisters of the Blessed Sacrament, and she was canonized a saint in 2000. Bit of trivia, this is me here. She is the only canonized saint to be born in the U.S. Now, many people think that Elizabeth Seton was the first American saint, but Elizabeth Seton was born in 1774 when we were still a British colony. I'd love to leave you with a bit of useless trivia. True. So, why am I telling you the story of St. Catherine? One of my goals as we continue here is just to tell you about people I find admirable. And I'm going to start doing that more often, and she is certainly one. But like her, we may have gifts of which we are unaware. We may have been put into slots by ourselves or by other people. We may need to discover what it is we are called to do, or we may need to be able to listen when other people say, you should try this. You would be good at this. Why don't you give that a shot? How many people do you know later in life have been called to do something different? When I went to One Spirit Seminary, it was full of people who had a career and then decided to do something else. Maybe because it came to them, or maybe because someone looked at them and said, you should really try this. I think you'd be good. Maybe these people tip us to the resources that we can be. Katharine thought that her only resource was money. It took someone else to say, I see this in you. You should give this a try. This may be your calling. She listened, and she made a huge difference in the world by following that calling and using all the gifts that God gave her. So what holds us back? Fear, perhaps, uncertainty, convention. I couldn't do that. I'm too busy. I don't have the money. I don't have the time. I'm not smart enough. That's not our job. Our job is not to think small. Our job is to realize that God gave us gifts for a reason. He put desire in our hearts for a reason, and we are here to use it. We only have so much time to do it. So our job is to be brave and think large and step out and make a difference with the gifts we have. Who was it, George Bernard Shaw, who said, when I die, I want to be all used up? Didn't he? Our job is to let God spend us, all of us, and we leave it all on the field. Julia Butterfly Hill, in Legacy from Luna, wrote, there will always be points along my path that will challenge me with struggles and adversities that seem at first glance too big to take on, too big to change, too big to transform. But as I learned in the most powerful, sacred time of my life, the difference is in the doing. We do the right thing because it is the right thing to do regardless of the outcome. We love with all that we have, even in the face of overwhelming hatred and violence, because we know that love in action is the hope for our world. And by using our gifts that are in our hearts that we have been given, we are love in action. And that is the hope as we go forward. I want to leave you with one more quote. And this is from Eknath Eswaran, Words to Live By. He writes, "In the spiritual lore of India, it is said that God whispered only one word in our ears when he sent us into the world. Give. Give freely of your time, your talent, your resources. Give without asking for anything in return. This is the secret of living in joy and security." Let's take these thoughts and meditate.